Hello, everybody. Welcome to Yerushalmi Chagigah. We're on Daf Yud, and we are at the two dots. Maisa, interesting Daf today. Maisa Rabbi Yochanan Zakei Shei Mahalach Al Derech is going on the road. Reich V'Lachamor. He's riding his donkey, but Elazar Ben Aroch Malach Acharav and Elazar Baruch is riding behind him. Amalei Rebbe. Hashineni Perik Echel b'Maisa Mekava. Teach me something. Teach me a Perik in the Maisa Mekava in Yechezkel, which we said yesterday is restricted. Only to certain individuals. That you can only learn if you're a chacham. Nice can only be learned if you're a chacham and you have your own havana. We saw that in the Mishnah. Amaloi Rebbe. So he said, Rabbi Lazar said to him, Rebbe, Tasheni lemedol lefanecha ani. Let me say something to you about the Ma'is Mekava. Amaloi. So Rabbi Yochanan said, no, zog. Kivin Shabbos with Rebbe Elazar ben Aruch ben Ma'aseh Merkava. Once Rebbe Elazar started dashing the Ma'aseh Merkava, Yolu Rebbe Yochanan ben Zakim ben Achamar, Yochanan Zakim got off his donkey. Amar, Ein B'din Shehei Shemei Kavod Koini V'ani Roicha B'Achamar. It's not correct that I should be riding, drive my car and listening to Kavod Koini. Looking back at Kadosh Baruch Hu, so he got off his donkey. Hoch v'yoshvulahen tachasilan. So they sat down. Tachasilan echad. They sat down under a tree. V'yarda ish min Shemayim. Fire came down from the min Shemayim. V'kifoi. Some surrounded by Malach Hashos. Mekaftzin lefneihem. Kibnei chopes meichel lefnei chasen. And Malach Hashos were dancing around them. Like in front of a chasen. Nen amalach echad mitoich ha'eish. Omak kidvarecha v'laz ben aruch. Kein humayis mekavadis. One of the malachim called out. And that's exactly the way you're dashing, Rebbe Lezer. That's the Ma'aseh Merkava. Miyat possible kol ilonas pihen v'amru shira. The tree started saying shira, and he sees it's in the pasuk. Oz yu'anu atzei hayo'ar. Kim shegam Rebbe Lezer ben Aruch ben Ma'aseh Merkava. Once Rebbe Lezer ben Aruch finished dashing Ma'aseh Merkava, Rabbi Yochanan Zakei ben Oshka Roishai gave him a kiss on his head. Obama Baruch Hashem Elokei Avram Yitzchak Yaakov Shnosel Avram Avinu ben Chacham Yodei Lidrosh B'kvoid Avinu Shvach Shemayim. Right? Give life to the Bashef who gave, right? He has descended like Rosa ben Aruch, who knows how to be Marbek for Shemayim. Yeshacho no lidrosh ve'enu no mikayim. You have people who can darshan, but they can't actually fulfill it. No mikayim ve'enu no doirish. People can mikayim, but they're not good as darshani. Elaz ben Aruch no doirish ve'nu mikayim. He can do baruch Hashrech Avram Avinu sheyotzim achalatzecha Elaz ben Aruch. Became Shishom Rabbi Yosef HaKoyin. Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel, once they heard about this, I guess the story became famous, and they heard about this. So Afheim Paschu b'Mais Mekava they darshan also Amru Yom Echad Tekufas Tammuz Haya. When they were darshaning, it was during the summer. The Rosh Haaretz v'Nus HaKeshes Be'onet, even though it's unusual in that part of the world to rain during the summer, the clouds formed and there was a rainbow in the sky. Yotze Baskal B'Amalei and Arei Amokin Ponu Lechem V'Atriklin Mutalachem Atam and Talmidechem Uzmanu Lekachlishes. That there's a place for you up in the Mesivta to Rikia that's ready for you. The corridor is open for you, and you and your Talmid are going to sit in the third row, and we're going to see what the third row of what. So it's in front of the Shekhinah. Ba'asi Command Oma Soiva Smachas Hispanecha. Right, the quarter of the pasuk Sheva and Darshan Soiva Sheva Kita Shel Tzadikim Lasid Lavai. There's 7 rows of the groups of tzaddikim, and they were Muslim to row number 3 of those 7 rows. Shuv Ma'aseh Rabbi Shua Shoyim Halach B'derech U'Ben Zayim Abo Kineged. There's another story of Rabbi Shua. He was on the road, and Ben Zayim is coming towards him. Shal B'Shlomi said hello, but Lo Yeshiva didn't answer him. Amalei Meyayin Olayim Ben Zayim. What's going on? What he so preoccupied with Ben Zayim? Amalei. So Ben Zayim said to him, "Stakelis with Ma'aseh Bereishis." I was thinking about Ma'aseh Bereishis, and we had learned yesterday that you don't Ma'aseh Bereishis is also kind of restricted. You have to be on a certain level to dash Ma'aseh Bereishis. Ve'im be'mayim al yonah ma'im tachtoina ela k'mol l'pasech tefach. And I realized, oh my goodness, between the upper and the lower waters, only a pasech tefach. That's all that holds us from the abyss. Nemakan, and where did I get this from? Nemakan richav ne'olahan l'kineshi yakino el gazol v'yirachiv. So it says by Ma'aseh Bereishis v'ruach elokim rach hefes. So that's richuf. Al Pnei Amoyim, and it says Kineshio Kinal Gazolov Al Gazolov Yirachiv and tell him Richush Nemalahalan given it again, just like the Nesher, it's kind of touching the wingtips, right? And it's touching, not touching Afrikush Nemakana given it again. So see, it's kind of in other words, the world is very fragile. Amr Shula Tamid of Hare Ben Zayim Vachutz. He's a goner. Below Yom Kalim Achinifta Ben Zayim. And there was only a couple of it was a short period of time, and Zayma was nifted. Rabbi Yehuda Bapasi B'Shem Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Shloisha Hortzu Teirosim Fnei Rabban. There were three that the Torah that they darshan about Ma'aser Merkava was Hortzu that they found favor in the eyes of their Rebbeim. Who was that? And you'll see it's a direct lineage of Talmud of Rabbi to Talmud. Rabbi Shua Lefnei Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, Rabbi Akiva Lefnei Rabbi Yeshua, and Hananya ben Chachinoi Lefnei Rabbi Akiva. Mekam Ve'elach ain't that in the key. But after this already, people didn't have the clarity of mind to darshan and learn properly the Ma'aser Merkava. Right. Once we talk about Ben Zoma, what happened Ben Zoma, right? What happened with him? So we know the famous story of before that Nichnas Paradis, according to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, doesn't mean literally, but they did attempt to think of different of different things that were high madrigas of thought. Echad Hitzitzul Meis is one who looked and he died. Echad Hitzitz V'Nifka, and he was pogum. In other words, he went crazy. Echad Hitzitz V'Kitzitz Ben he went and he cut down a tias. And once we're using, according to Kanievsky, once we're using paradise as a paradise, again doesn't mean literally paradise, right? As um, it's so we're using, but we're the ones using the paradise, a garden. We're also using the tias as it's an allegorical reference here. Echad nichnas b'shalom v'yatz b'shalom. That was, and we'll see in a minute. Ben Azai, and the Grutz changes to Ben Zayma. But I think either way, it could work. Ben Azai hitzitz v'nifgal because v'oime devash matzos chol tayeka. Right. So Ben Azai hitzitz v'nifga, and he was killed. And it says, I'm sorry, Vinifka, he was pog. In other words, he fought and affected his mind. And it says, we see it in Pasuk, Dvash Matzasa Chol Dayeka, and the end of that Pasuk talks about, you're going to throw it up, what's the Lashon over there? Yeah, Messiah also, Pentis Benove Kasoi, right? If you eat too much, you'll throw it up. So that's what Vinifka, he just went crazy. Ben Zayma hit it to Mace, he ended up dying, which is true. Ben Zayma ended up dying, we just saw in the Gemara. Again, but the Gemara switches these. And all of Yaakov and Hashem after Chasidov. That it's hard for a to look at the Mavis to righteous ones, this Chasidim. But still, because the Reb Chaim Kanievsky brings down, it's a reference, right? That Lo Yirani Adam V'chai, like Hakadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, so he couldn't live anymore, unfortunately, because he looked. Ech Acher is Hitzitz v'Kitzitz ben Atiyas. Mani Acher, who is Acher? We're going to discuss him in a minute. Elisha ben Avuya, Shoyahorig Rabbi Torah. He killed Gedolim in Torah. Now, Amrin called, so they said, and Elisha Avuya obviously at one point was a tremendous right, he's a tremendous Tanner, Meir Rebbe, and we'll see that in a minute. But he went off that. He was Kaitzitz Natius. In other words, his Natius was originally Mudim. He was Kaitzitz them, and he went off the derech. He cut them down, and he went so far as even to kill Gedolei Torah. Amrin Kol Talmud Avachamele Mishabeach Baraisa Avakatale. Any Talmud that he saw was being successful in learning, he would go and kill him. The lawyer not only that, they'll have all the base value. We go to the yeshiva. You see the Kindle sitting in front of the Rebbe. What are these kids there fetching a bank over here? What are they doing? This kid over here, he should be a contractor. He should be a metalworker. He should be a hunter. He should be a tailor. The Kiva the Havan Shaman came when the kids heard that Havashavkin lay. They left base medrash and they would go out to work. So they lost the Talmidim because of Al Titan is Picha Lachti is Psarecha. Right? Why Shechibel Yadav Shaloi Sayish, because this guy's mouth caused him, right? Ach's mouth caused him to destroy things. It was macht other people. As you saw, he sent them out to go work instead of going to learn. Af b'shas shunda, even during the shmad, have matinon loin metolin v'hav miskavnun mitun trei chad matum mishum shneim shosem locha achas. So what happened is during the shmad, nothing changes. There's a story of my own grandfather who was in Siberia, and they to avoid doing malach, and this is brought down actually, I believe, in the book from class to Siberia, to avoid doing malach on Shabbos, the rest on Shabbos, they did malacha that could be done one person, there were two people, and this is mamish over here, this Gemara. And so Acha saw that they were doing this to avoid doing malacha deraisa. Amar, he said to the workers over there, those ancient kapos, Atunun yichidon, go and make sure that they carry the law by themselves. This will be over the Raisa. This is what they did. One of the things they also did once they were forced to carry it on their own, they figured let's not complete the malach. And instead of taking it from transferring from Shus Yachid to Shus Rabbim, let's put it down in a Karmelis. So Achas obviously told the policeman, no, turn it in Sluchim. Make sure they carry glass, very sensitive kalim, and this way they can't just put it down in public, suddenly. So they went and they made them glass. This way, glass can't just put down in the cameras and then continue on to the Yushus to the Rishus Harabim. This would avoid Mlach Deraisa. So if they're carrying glass, they couldn't do that, and they had to carry it the whole way. That's how bad Acha became. Now to finish off the last one, it was Nichnas Lepardes, Rebbe Kiva Nichnas B'Sholem, Yatza B'Sholem, Olav HaKas V'Oime, Mashchini Achrecha Norutzi, Norutza, Aviani HaMelech Hadorov, and we see that, and then he came out B'Sholem. Now, once we were talking about Acha, we're going to say some stories about Rebbe Meir Yosef Dorsh B'Beis Medrash at the Tveria. Rebbe is sitting in hearing Rosh Beis Medrash in Tveria on Shabbos. Over Elisha Rabbi, Rochav Al Susya, B'Yom Shufta, so it was on Shabbos, like I said, and Elisha, his Rebbe, Elisha ben Avoy is driving by in his car, on his horse. So they told Reb Meir, the guys go inside, and they told Meir, hey, Rebbe's outside. He stops his drasha, and off the Gabe goes out to Ache. Amalek, Ma'ave Sadosh Yomadeh. So Ache says to Reb Meir, no, what was the drasha about today? Amalek Hashem Beich is Achris, and it's by Eiv, Amalek. Right, so it says over there in the Pasik, Hashem Beich is Achris, Eiv Menushisai, okay, so Amalei no mapsach the base. So Acha says to Rabbeinu, no, what did you dash? Or you mechadish? Amalei ve'yoyis Hashem is kol hasheli evil mishnah shekofel is kol that he doubled whatever he had originally. So Acha says, oh, this is Hadrasha. Vay demov de v'lo mishachin. This is terrible. People are not the girl are not around anymore. Akiva Rabcho lo yav darish ken. Your Rebbe Akiva he didn't darish like this. El Hashem berachas achris iyav mereshisa. B'schus mitzvahs u'masim tovim shoy b'yad mereshisa. In other words, that after Kadosh Baruch Hu benched Eiv from the b'schus of his original meisim that he had. Amalei said. No, what else did you darshan? He said the good is the better is a thing from the end of something than the beginning. What was the chiddush? So when he had children when he was younger, Mason they died as a knusay, and then he had children again when he got older. And those were children Lahasid. So that's a kim of the pasuk. Have a toiv achris tov and meshisay. So you see, the end was better than the beginning because the children there was young, they died. Ladam Shas Eschari, another partially gave Ladam Shas Eschari, somebody did business, the Aldusu was young, gave Hifsit, and he lost his business, went down, it was a Knusai, but later on he did business, and Staka, he made money, have a Taibach was Tov Shisa. So you see, it's better at the end than the beginning. Or Ladam Shalom Torah ben Arusai, somebody learned Torah when he was younger, was Shachcha, and he forgot it was a Knusai. And then when he got older, he learned again, became when he was Mekayim, and then it stayed by him. Have again, Tabachas Tov Meshisa. Omar, so Yachas says, Oy, Vaidem Uvdin, Loy Meshachin. Woe is to what we lost and not around anymore. Akiba Rab Chalev Dorish came. Your Rabbi Akiba, he didn't dash like this. So the Toiv Achris Dov Meshisa, is Manchu Toiv Meshisa. Now, something's good from the get go, it has a key. Otherwise, it doesn't have a key. Ubi Maisa, that's actually what happened to me. And what's the story that happened to Acher? So Avuya Abba, so Acher says, Avuya Abba, my father, Avuya Migdol Yerushalayim, how he was the greatest people in Yerushalayim. B'yom Shabbat Molani, the day of my bris, Kol Chol Gedol Yerushalayim, V'yishivim B'bayis Echad, Rav Lazar B'Yeshua B'bayis Echad. So he took all the Gedol Yerushalayim in one house, set them up in one house, and he set Rav Lazar B'Yeshua up in another house. In the Achla B'Shos, in Shar Metapchim Uraktin. So one, they started eating for the Suda and drinking, they started clapping and dancing. Rav Lazar B'Yeshua, Adin and Asikim b'didoin. They're busy, the dancing. Let's go learn something. V'yashvu and esaskib divrei Torah and Torah. L'navim and Navim l'ksuvim. V'yordeish min hashemayim afakim. Now we keep some. It surrounded them in Avoya's house. Amla Avoya says, "Hey, Rabbi say, ma bosim lisref is basi alai. Are you trying to burn down my house?" Amrullah said, "Chas v'shalom." Ela Yoshua Yinu was sitting b'chayzim divrei Torah and Torah and Vim l'ksuvim l'kvayit devarim smechin knisinasim misina. Avoya say, "Hey, eish malachekes oisan kelichikason misina beikana sinasan misina lo nitna lebeish." Because and where do we see this from? We were just sitting and learning, and so what do you know? A fire comes down the same way that happens, we know, in on our Sinai. But it's not here to do the damage the house. Avuya said that. My father Avuya said to me, Avuya said, "Kachi koicha Torah. If this is how great Torah is, in Iskamli aben azel the Torah nimafrishay, then I will set my son aside to learn Torah if he lives." And Lafi Shaloi Hoisek Kavanasa L'Shem Shemaim, since his Kavana was not L'Shem Shemaim, was Avuyo, the fifth different is Kambo Isaish, and that's why myself, he says Isaish referring to himself, that's why I didn't last. Amalei, Oma Vesa Darsh Tuvan, Acha says, no, what else did you darshan about? Amaloi, Lo Yachenu Zav Eschuchis. Nothing, Zav Eschuchis, and that can't be Marich. It can't be Marich, like Zav Eschuchis has they can't value it. Amalei Mapasach the baby was a chiddush. Amalei divrei Torah koshen liknos kechliza. It's very hard to get to, like kliza. The noichen labi geluz the measly kechliz chochis, which is fragile. Uma kliza kechliz chochis and mishtav yochel lachzul asos kelim kimoshoyu ma doch kliza kechliz chochis. If they break, you can now go and reconstitute them as Kalim after Shechachat Tamuda, even if Tamachachim, if God is learning, you can go back and learn again. Amalei Dayechameya, that's enough. At Kantchum Shabbos, can't go any further with me. Amalei min hain at Yodarino. Amalei min Talfit the Susya Davina Mani Bahayla. I counted the hoof beats of my horse, and I see that's it. We went 2,000 amas, so you've reached the end. Amalei b'chol ador chachmis esbicha v'les atchaz b'cha. You have all this chachmi, you're so smart. You don't do. Why don't you do tshuva? Amalei lesson ayachal. I can't do tshuva. Amalei lamas. He said, why? Amalei shepam achas one time isi oivel lefnei beis kodesh kadoshim rochav asusu b'yom kippur shkolis b'Shabbos. So as oivel all the averis, I was riding a horse on him kippur that fell on Shabbos. V'shamati baskol yotzis beis kodesh kadoshim. Yed baskol coming to kodesh kodeshim. V'ymer shuv bonim. Everybody can go and do tshuva, chutz mi Elisha ben Avuya, except for Elisha ben Avuya. She other koichi morabi, because he knew me, and he was rebelled me anyway. V'chol da min hein. So where did this come from that he was he went off the derech? So Gemara says it was a story. One time, he's sitting and learning. So Elisha ben Avuya is sitting and learning because Kenisa. Sees a guy go up on a tree, but not the aim alabanon. So he's over the mitzvah and he takes the aim alabanon, and he leaves that area b'shalom, no problem, it's unaffected. The next day, sees another guy come, goes up on top of the tree, so he's mekayim the mitzvah. What happens to the guys mekayim the mitzvah? And he goes down off the ladder, gets bitten by a snake, and he dies. He says, Ksiv, Shalech Tishalach. So Elisha ben Avuya says to himself, Ksiv says, Shalech Tishalach, Manita v'chovarach the yamin. What happened? This guy got bitten by the snake and he dropped dead. He didn't live long either. Rabbi Yaakov had already dashed in earlier. But it wasn't referring to necessarily this life. And some people say, if he saw the tongue of Yehuda Nachtaim in a mouth of a dog, the drinking blood. Amazut Torah Zuschara, Zaloshan Shoy Moiti Divrei Torah Kesiknon, Zaloshan Shoy Yoge Betorah Kalyamav, Zut Torah Zuschara. He says, look what happened. This is the one who dashed in Divrei Torah. This is the one who learned Torah his whole life. He worked hard. This is the reward he gets, that his tongue is carried around by a dog. Must be there's no manschah, no tchias mason. The rest of the story tomorrow.